Welcome back to the Pre-Vetted podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, we're joined by Grant Byron. He's a product and operations leader with more than 20 years of experience building teams, products, and processes that help companies scale. He has worked across startups, scale-ups, digital services, edtech, and marketplace platforms, and he has led work spanning product engineering, operations, and commercial strategy. He has also been part of social impact initiatives and global accelerator programs, bringing a unique mix of practical execution and mission-driven leadership. Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm honored to have you here today. So,
Good.
for people meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So as you touched on, my experience has been very much in product and operations. And since the new year, I decided to start a new consulting firm that focuses on kind of bringing these skills to medium-sized businesses. It's a consulting firm called Forward. And yeah, the idea is to focus very much on AI implementation. I think also just digital transformation. What I'm seeing a lot of is companies are hearing the buzzword and they want to get involved in AI, but they don't know really how to do it. And I think with my skill set, I can really help organizations just adopt technology, not necessarily AI, but like technology. So that's what I'm doing right now. I've started a consulting firm. So yeah, quite excited about that.
That sounds exciting. Yeah, I mean, it's you have so many opportunities to grow your consulting, because I think that there's a lot of hype about AI, but there's also a lot of misunderstanding about how
Yep.
to use and leverage AI. So yeah, I'm hoping we can explore that a little bit more.
Okay. Nice.
So you started with design and web development, right?
Yes.
What drew you into that kind of work early on?
Yeah, I think from childhood, I just had a passion for design and drawing. And I suppose the real thing there is creativity. Like I like to create and build. And obviously, when you leave school, you you never really know what you want to do. And I just went into studying that and, trying to use my creativity. And I think just always being able to take something from blank canvas to something usable. And that's really where it started.
Right, right. It's so beautiful to build something out of nothing. And
Yes.
I think that's how, as a builder, that's the first purpose that we find, right? Building
Yes.
stuff. And then I think that the second purpose that I found, a second higher purpose that I found is, what's the purpose of building something if nobody's using it? So being able to go from building and then getting people to use it so you can have an impact on their lives.
Yeah.
It becomes
I
so
think that's
powerful.
always been, with teams I've worked with, not every product goes out and is successful because we used to run an agency and, you do a lot of like MVP type products and they get launched into the market. And I think one of the real soul killers for developers at the time was always when, you spend so much time building something and then to see it hit the market and it doesn't do as well as you thought. It's can be quite soul killing. But I know what you mean. Like, so there's two parts to it. There's building it, and then there's also how do you get it so that people can use it. And I think when you start seeing people use your product, there's something special in that.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I evolved that purpose through many years. Right. So
Yeah.
It's easy to say, but hard to put words into it. Right. So yeah. And then tell us a bit about how you move from being a coder, a builder, to operations and leadership.
Yeah, I think the real pivot point was, as I mentioned, I'd worked in a a software development agency, and I'd done design and things like that for quite a while. And obviously with design, right, you're always dealing with customers. So you have to be communicating. I think the gift of design is when you can really listen to the requirements and then translate that into like the vision of the customer, right? I think when I was working at the agency, they kind of saw I had a very good rapport with customers, and that kind of transitioned into like service delivery manager, where I started running projects, and constantly dealing with customers. And because I had a good rapport internally with the development team and I understood how the teams worked, I could play like both sides of the fence, if you want to call it. So I knew how to handle the clients and I knew how to handle internally the developers. So yeah, it kind of organically flowed into that. And then from there, I went into like a general management role, and I really got exposure to like HR and finance and more the commercial side of businesses. And so like it's progressed, right? And over my career, I've really got a full spectrum of the whole flow, right? I know what it takes to work in the ops side, on the commercial side. And I think it was more organic than chasing titles. It was more about, I was always willing to get my hands dirty and take the reins, I think.
Right. Right. It's natural progression. I think that a lot of engineers prefer to become an individual contributor as a senior engineer, and I think that's a valid career path. Others prefer to become more of a leadership role, and then there are people like you, and I empathize with your story because it's a similar story as mine, that I got
Yes.
involved on the product side and on the business side, and you get a larger appreciation of how building software it's a part of a bigger thing, right?
Yes.
And being able to build a product and also understand the business sustainability of those products, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm seeing it more now, how I think a lot of people get stuck in a side. So they're either only in product or they're only in ops. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of experience everything. I've worked on the marketing side. So I actually have a very good scope of the whole flow, like every department in a sense. And I think when you have that knowledge, I can nearly sympathize with each department. So like I know what each one wants, and I don't overpromise when I know the one can't deliver, right? So, like a sales team will always overpromise because they don't really know the effort that goes into building something, where I know the effort that goes, so I can control the promise in a sense when it comes to the commercial side. So yeah, so I think it's quite a nice skill to have when a lot of people avoid the generalist, but actually being the generalist and understanding the whole thing, I think it's helped me quite a lot, yeah.
Right. Right. I agree with you. I mean, having more appreciation for other other roles like product ownership, like project management, that when I was as an engineer, I didn't have much appreciation. And then when I start going to, jump into the other side, as you say,
Yes.
then I start learning, you know, all the intricacies and the nuances of those roles. And, I start valuing more those roles as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you enjoy most about building teams and structures where, nothing existed before?
Yeah, actually, when I've been thinking about things like that, is like, I think if I look at my arc through my career, it actually I always seem to attract the blank page type of scenario where it's design, you start with the blank page and you create something, you build it, and then you see it. And then I think there's a component of validation, when you see someone then use the design or see the design or the team is performing well, there's like kind of there's something that like excites me about that when you see whatever you've created be successful. And what I've always enjoyed is I enjoy people, and I enjoy helping people. So like I actually always, with my teams, I always try to find what could like motivate the person, what was their career trajectory, and If I could focus on those things and I helped them to get there or help them perform well, then I felt like I was performing well and like there was a good feeling to that. So I always liked helping people and help them to build on themselves. So that was like a great thing for me working in teams. Yeah. And I think it's just, I've just always wanted to build. It's, I don't know, there's something about creating something from scratch. And if I think about it, it's always been from design. When it comes to teams, I always take the challenge of going into a business and building a new team or building a new structure. So there's definitely something that excites me about that blank canvas and trying to sort of solve the puzzle and like create something effective.
Right. I think that building teams, I mean, when you build a web page, right, you're building something that it could have logic, but it's deterministic, right? Now here, when you're building teams, you have people with agency, right?
Yes.
That it's a whole different game complexity, but you at the end of the day, you're still building something, right? So
Yeah.
I find that when you see that working properly, you see the impact that it has on the client, you see
Mm.
the impact that it has on the people, right? I had people on my team that were able to buy a new car or a new house, or they were able to get
Yeah.
married, right? And sometimes they invite me to their weddings, right? I feel such a sense of proud and um, an appreciation for, because that person put their life on my,
Yeah.
they trust me and my company, and I'm able to return that trust by, by providing, a good salary, stability, a good,
Yes.
a good life, right? A good work-life balance. Um, and all the frustrations that I feel throughout the challenges of making the team work pays off when I see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's fulfilling, I suppose. I mean, that's for me, like quite a good word for it. I mean, there's there's something nice in if you say like building sites or mobile apps and creating something that people can use and it's quite functional. Like there's something to that. Uh, so yeah, I suppose builders will understand. It's like inherent. You just want to build things, but
Right.
yeah, that's.
Right.
But
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
I
I
do
think it's
enjoy the
amazing.
people, and I must admit, like something I've had to struggle with being more remote is so the last 4 years I did a lot more remote work, and it's not as I can see you lose a lot of that like people skills and the you dealing touch the touch side of it, and dealing with people constantly through the screen is quite a challenge in its own side. So it does. I think the whole thing about remote, it kind of does kill that energy of what you do like that, of building the teams. Didn't have the same, like building remote teams wasn't as fun as building like a team in, what do you call it, in real life, in
Right.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a large team, and you lose the feeling of how big it is until
Yeah.
you invite them all to a single place for a, company meeting. And
Yes.
then you realize, wow, all of these people depend on us, depend on the company. Then you start like sinking the weight of all that responsibility, but also the
Yeah.
excitement of all the people that you're helping, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, yes. So you have worked at the intersection of product and operations, right? Why do you think that combination is so powerful?
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier, is nearly being able to see both sides of the fence, understanding how operations work. And then, I think because operations is quite internally focused and then product is quite externally focused, you're thinking more about the customer. So I think to have both lenses on does provide a lot more I suppose you a little bit more aware of what things get affected. If you make something happen on the one side, what's the impact on the other side? I think like an example, if I thought about it, which was more if we used the example of commercial and ops, is, when I used to push the teams running the agency, we would have like billing cycles obviously every month. And when you used to push the team to deliver and then say the team's late, they just see it as like, say they're a week late and they say, well, it's a week late. It's not like the end of the world. But from a commercial side of it, you can't then maybe bill, right? Because you haven't completed the project. But because they don't have that context, they don't see that. So for them, the pressure is not on that. They're just more thinking about, well, it's not that important. But if you were on the other side and you're saying, well, we can't bill and then we need the cash flow, things like that, then it does become important, right? So
Right.
I think that's just a great illustration of showing, if you could see both sides, then you realize, okay, I'm putting the pressure on ops, but there's also because of this commercial element. But when they only see the one side of the fence, they're not aware of that, say, the commercial element, and then they're making decisions based on only what they can see. And I think as you move up through management, you start to realize that sometimes, staff don't always have the full picture, and I think it's the same with like when you can see product and ops, if you don't have the full picture, then you're making decisions more in like an echo chamber or a siloed view. So I think the more views you have, you tend to make better decisions. That would be my take on it. Yeah.
Yes, it's hard because you cannot also transmit the pressure on the business
Yeah.
side to the engineering side, because that will
Yeah.
also make them fail. But if you don't transmit some part of it at least, then they're unaware.
Yes.
And it's a delicate balance to how much and how little, right? There's not a single answer.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah. And I've seen happening on being on both sides. I've seen that happening multiple times, and it's,
Yeah.
at first, my first reaction I thought that people didn't care, and then I very quickly realized it's not that they don't care; it's that they don't have the context. They don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not supposed to know all the pressure, right? They're supposed to know functionally. They just need to know what's the next step, because otherwise it would be overwhelming for them, right?
Yes. But I think now more than ever, we're learning how important context is, right? I think when we look at AI, I think that's a real way you can see now that when context is missing, how things can go so horribly wrong. That's like really one of the great things what I think about AI is it's teaching people to provide more context, which is something you've always wanted when you build product and whatever. You want like proper context, you want proper scope. It's nearly like AI forces that because you're dealing with this dumb terminal in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very optimistic kind of dumb terminal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Optimistic. Yes. Always optimistic.
When you say you're wrong,
Yeah.
always the answer is, of course you're right. Let me show you why I'm wrong, right? Yes. I the best way that I've been described it, that situation, is that you should treat an agent as a new hire, a new junior hire.
Yes.
That you need to teach it how to do things properly.
Yep. Yeah, and it needs context, right? So again,
Right.
that's why I think being at the intersection of both sides of the fence, I have more context. In theory, it helps me to make better decisions, I would think. But that's my view.
What are your thoughts on, people talk about now product people can build MVPs or vibe code, because now AI allows them to do that. We also have the developers that now they can use agents to enhance what they're building, right? And that's what I've seen talking is that the merge between product and engineering is kind of getting blurry, because now one can do the other and the other can do the first, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so my view on firstly AI doing coding is I still believe you need the engineer, right? I believe the AI is more the amplifier to an engineer. because I feel like the AI is not good enough and you need the oversight. The code that it's producing is not great, like at the level it's producing. So I think when it does produce most probably good quality, it needs to be in small iterations, right? Where it's nearly like you very scoped and then you write in a thing. So what's coming through quite strongly is more like spec-driven development. So very well scoped specs, and then you start coding with, like, say, Claude, and you go in iterations, but the developer's going through it, right? I still feel you need the dev, and then he's just amplified by, let's say, 10x, which is still amazing, right? If you have a developer who can build a 3-month project in 1 month, I mean, that's amazing. That's like crazy. So then there's that part. So firstly, that's what I believe on the dev side. Now, do I believe a product manager can do the development of the dev? No, I don't think so. Especially, I think if you're using the thing of, I'm building a HTML website, sure, anyone could go build you a quick website in Claude. I mean, it's not complex. But when we talk building complicated systems like marketplaces, or like full-on systems that need to be production ready and handle like load and things like that, people don't realize I don't think you could just use a Claude to spin up a quick version and then you're going to get like 10,000 visitors a day and it's going to handle the load and you're going to get spammed and hackers. You know what I mean? So there's like a lot more that goes to an infrastructure of like a properly built system. Yeah. But I do believe the product, so to go back to your question, I do believe the product owners can do MVPs. I think that's a great idea. Like, they can spin up quick concepts. Like the other day, my wife had an idea for like an app for a rep. And I built it in Claude like pretty quickly. You know, she played with it but then she realized, okay, it's not as useful as she thought it would be, right? But that was nice, right? I didn't have to go to a developer. Who would have spent then weeks or like a week building it. I spent, let's say, 2 to 4 hours. We had a concept. She tried it. It was done. And so think about it, a day's worth of work. And you went from idea to testing the concept. Does it work? No. Gave it to some other reps. No, it doesn't work. Okay. It's not an idea you should go with. But if I had to go through the process of having a developer, I would have given the developer some spec I'd written with ideas. They would have built something. And like 3 weeks later, we would have had something, wasted a lot of money. So I'm very I would say the product person can definitely build MVPs, test out the concept with the teams. And then when it's ready and you go, okay, we validated it, against some market research and there is a real thing here, then take it to the development team, scope it out more thoroughly, and then build a more production ready system. But the two aren't actually crossing over. If anything, by them building the MVPs, you're not wasting the time of the developer. The developer can spend time on the more serious production stuff. That would be my view. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that having the engineers to be more product aware, understanding why are we building this, what's in it for the user. I used to do that before AI because I think it would add more value to developers, right? And now with AI agent coding, then the developer can guide the code, can guide the automated tests to validate the expected behavior for the user based on the whys, right? And then we can leverage, or as you mentioned, enhance the productivity of the developers, because instead of spending hours reviewing syntax, we can just build and give the agent the guidance of what to build. And that's why product aware, it's what I think it's being able to be more specific on the specs, on the requirements and the expected behavior. So then the agent can build it. And then as an engineer, you can review it and decide, okay, what are things that we need to improve, to scale, to, things like that, because agents are not really good at dealing with abstraction. So we have to provide that, abstract what happens in the real world into what the coding environment would need. And then from there, build objects, build classes, and all that stuff, right? But if we provide those specs, then the agents are really good at doing that, right? At just the
which is
syntax
that
of
spec-driven
coding.
Yeah, that's spec-driven. And that, I think, more recently, like IBM have launched some of the, they have those great education videos. And I think they've released one like recently in the last month, like 2 months or something, but also around spec-driven development. So it's clearly a thing. I think to code nicely, you need to create these well-documented specs, and then you push it through. You don't just start coding with Claude. I think it's like anything, right? You need to have like a proper requirement and scope, because if you just start building from your mind, it gets messy, right? Yeah. And I think when you start coding and it builds something, and then to try and fix it and get it to, I think you start getting in like twisted, because you're like trying to recorrect it all the time. You maybe spend more time correcting than if you just coded the function yourself or something.
Right. It becomes, you were talking about becoming a 10x engineer with, AI enhancement. But
Yes.
in order to do that, you need to have clarity of what needs to be built. So you can use the tokens efficiently. You don't go back and forth with the agent. You can just provide the specs as clearly as possible, right? And that requires a level of understanding and deeper understanding of the product and the users. The engineers before didn't need to, because we work with the requirements document, and that's it, right? And then now we build, right? And in that process, we discover the specs, right? Yeah. And then on the product side, what I've seen happening is that, as you mentioned, now, if we want to build a prototype and validate it with users, we can just vibe code it very quickly, test it, see the results, right? Without having to go through the development cycle, which could take weeks, right? Or maybe months, right? And you can iterate that faster. And then you can show that to the developers and say, well, this is what we want. Right?
Yes.
I had a conversation with the agent, and now this is kind of what we want, right?
Yeah.
So we can go, instead of using a product requirement document, we can just show something that it's, more interactive, right? Yeah. I've done something like that with storytelling. So I talk with the product owners to, in addition to giving us the requirements, let's build wireframes, mockups, and let's tell a story. So instead of being a boring meeting where we will review a long document, everybody wanted to participate because it was fun, right? It was, let's hear that story, right? And even though people that would not build it, they wanted to be there, right?
Yes.
So, and in that process, we provide more clarity on what actually needed to be built, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's like the perfect definition of like a use case in a way, right? I've always liked, talking about the journey the person's going to have. So what will Johnny do? Johnny will come. Johnny will click on here, and he will, because Johnny wants to do. I think actually doing it like that, the story, it does help you to kind of walk through the steps quite well. So yeah, I like the idea of the story. And I think also sometimes, I know it's a lot of work, but like also knowing your personas sometimes can also be super helpful. Who is that real target audience?
Right. And the other thing we've done is put designers to work with the product owners to help them have more clarity on the requirements. Because we used to have requirements that were not as mature or precise. And instead of going back and forth with the development team, then the designers could just work back and forth with the product people. It's faster to just change a mock-up than to change an application, right? So the more they would go back and forth, the better. So by the time we got the requirements, we had a better story. We had more clear requirements. We have not only the happy path, but also the negative path, things like that. And it actually allows us to build faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
nice.
But there was this transition moment where I had to convince them for the buying of working with the designers, because that meant 3 weeks pause of new requirements, right? While they were building on better requirements, right? And
Yes.
it took a while to do that convincing process, right? But after they saw the results, they appreciate it, right? Everybody appreciated it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's, I suppose we're all a bit, I don't know, like humans can be a bit lazy. So they tend to, I think there's so much value in doing the work up front and really being able to scope and design, like, and really think the process through. So by the time it really does get to the build, it's actually way easier. But if you slack on that prep up front, then the build just always will take so much longer. You miss the marks. So
Right.
yeah, there's like a lot of value in doing the work up front and really being prepared. I suppose it's like building a house, right? With the architectural plans, and you're going to build all over the show. But if you have a very clear view of what you're building and what you want to like construct, then it's always far better.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. I think in this case, it was a little bit of pressure because they had a lot of things going on their backlog. It was a little bit of they didn't know what they didn't know. So it was about nobody asked the questions. And by the time they would bring up the new feature to a sprint planning meeting, you had,
Mm.
a bunch of people. So you can ask a few questions, but you're always limited by the time, right? So being able to convince them to do prepping before by asking those questions. The first iteration was with me. I sit down with one of the product
Yes.
owners and we kind of go back and forth, right? So it was much
Yeah.
more efficient. When they saw value into that, then I convinced that product owner to work with a designer that was better fitted on the skills to produce the
Yes.
mockups, right? I'm
Yes.
really bad at that, but a lot of what the work the designers were doing was not only design but also introspection and asking those questions, right?
Yeah,
So
because you have to
it became
understand how the user like interacts. I mean, that was what I had to always do was I suppose what we call the UX, right? I mean, as a designer in my time, we always used to do wireframes first, right? So no design. How is the user going to interact with the interface? Like where they're clicking, where is the eyes tracking? Above the fold things. What's the first thing they're going to see? Like, and the eye always tracks to the right first. So that's why the ads always used to be on the right of the arrow. A designer, I mean, in my time, the designers weren't just there to make a pretty picture. It was just I suppose that was always the definition of a UX UI designer is they're thinking way more through the process. They're thinking how the person's interacting with the screen. I think when it came into product would be more about defining the features and that, the designer would be thinking like, how's the user interacting with that
right.
screen or yes. So the two have to nearly like work together in my view. Yeah. They have to work together. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it does provide a lot of clarity on their thinking process. They have the knowledge of the users. They understand what the user needs and wants. So having the UX
Yes.
designers that can help them put that into first wireframes, then mockups, and then they can go back and validate it with the users, right? Now we have some AI that can assist on some of that process, but I feel that the UX designers still needed to guide that process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. Otherwise, you
I
might
didn't,
all start looking the same, because AI is pretty much
right.
going to design the same interface. And it always
Yes,
designs pretty much the fastest route, right? So it's not necessarily thinking maybe for your use case.
right. That's why we I think that the UX should still be there, because otherwise you get a bland design that is not
Yeah.
appealing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then
again, it comes down to there's always, like in my view, there's the human and then there's the AI that's creating like speed, right? So whether it's a UX person, but they still utilize the AI to amplify whatever they're doing. I think where AI really replaces things is when it's like more automation and, like things like that, then you don't need the human necessarily in there. Maybe there's just someone checkpoints. But I think when it comes to creative stuff, I still think it's more about amplifying the human than replacing the human in that context. But
I
obviously
agree.
AI will replace
Yes.
humans in different contexts. So when it comes in like more simple automation stuff, I think sure.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, going back to forward consulting, can you tell us a bit more about how you help businesses move from AI strategy to execution?
So obviously it's still quite new, but what I am seeing is, right, I think there's a lot of businesses that aren't always tech businesses, but they are obviously using SaaS products and things like that. And these businesses tend to just take things, because someone said it's good or something like that, and you start ending up with this whole system, which not necessarily the best fit for your organization. Because I think most people forget to approach a thing by like the problem. What is the problem you're really trying to solve? Not just by saying, oh, there's this piece of tech, I need to use it in my organization, and then they go and they implement it. You really should be trying to solve a problem, right? So is there a real problem? And then by understanding the problem and what the requirement is, then you can say, well, what is the best tool to solve that like issue? So I think a lot of companies don't do that, right? Like maybe the tech companies are like great at it, but there's a lot of like companies that don't do it, like normal businesses operating in other sectors, right? They just don't, they just get it wrong, or like they were wrongfully advised. So I think there's a great opportunity there. And then the second point is, so I see myself as utilizing my current skills, but then when you look at it through the sort of the AI lens, I see it still as the same. They still need to understand how they can implement a technology into their business. So I would still come in. Do you actually have a problem? There are organizations then that want stuff. So the first concept is come in, I understand the problem. One of the things we've been looking at is also to just work on providing like AI fluency, just like help people to come up to steam with like what it is even, because a lot of people don't know what is it and what should I be doing with it in my business, right? So just even teaching them what the products are, how do you interact with something like prompting and things like that. There's a gap in for that type of thing. And then the second part is like implementation, right? How do you leverage AI in your business? But I don't, obviously AI is the hot topic now. So that is something I'm obviously keen to do, but I'm just open to coming in and doing like digital transformation in businesses. Anywhere you can come and help the guys get set up, build proper processes that can help the business to scale. Because if you don't have the correct processes in place, it becomes much harder to scale when you start adding numbers. Things start to get
Right.
wobbly.
Yeah. Operation multiplies.
I would say, as in the consulting, it's about coming in, helping with operational scale, as well as how do I use AI in my business? What, like, even to help them at a basic form is like already a help, right? Because no one knows right now. What do I do with it? It's still so new. So
Right.
So coming in and showing them some automations, helping them get some automations into their business, if that's what it needs. But again, I'm not like someone who's just going to come in. I don't want to just come in and say, hey, you need this. It's more about first understanding, like, what is the challenge? What is their requirement? And then, okay, is AI ready? Like, do you need AI in your business? Can you leverage it or not? And then obviously take it from there.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that
Mm.
there's a lot of hype about AI and a lot of
Yeah.
misconceptions. And as you said, businesses doesn't know how to leverage it, right?
Yeah.
Or they don't get it because it's so different, right?
Yeah.
But
And it's
I
not for
think that
every business, right?
right,
Sorry,
right,
yeah, it's not. So that's why I've always, well, do you really have a problem? Is it something that your business does need? So not just get FOMO and say, I need it. Yeah. So, in other words, because if you do implement it in a place where it's not needed, it's going to be a failure, right? As a consultant, I would have failed and you won't really get the ROI on it. And I think when you're running a consulting business, you need to prove ROI, right? The return on investment, you need to show that. And if you implement it in the incorrect way or the incorrect place, you're not going to be able to show it. So for me, it's about putting it where it is needed. And if it is needed, then it will show ROI on it, I think.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. It's important to tell where to leverage AI, but also where it doesn't make sense, right? Because that's
Yes.
more powerful, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
And there's also the additional dimension of consuming AI and building AI, right? I mean, most of this business, they just need to consume it. They don't need to fine tune models or do anything like that, right? It's more about
Yeah.
setting the right context, setting the right rules, and then the agents can provide a lot of value, right?
Yeah. I mean, even companies need help around policy, right? Because staff are just going to be using stuff, agents, right? So even then, companies need help. Like, what is the correct policy even to implement? Because you can't ignore it, and say, well, that's fine to use, and then they're using free versions and sharing all your data to the learning models. Okay, so yeah, so I mean, I think there's lots of scope in the consulting space around it. Each person needs to find their space if that's what they want to do in it.
And what are your thoughts about or recommendations on how to leverage AI on software development teams?
I haven't, so to be honest, I'd finished with a software development team mostly when all the Claude stuff was really starting to come in. So I didn't, but I mean, one of the things I did see, right, is I found that sometimes it can make the dev teams a bit more, if I wanted to say the word, like stupid, in the sense of we had we would give like certain like support issues to a developer and he would constantly leverage AI. But he was actually smart enough to go through it himself. And I think you would end up with an answer that was really not the right answer. And I feel like if he had spent the time himself on a smaller task, he would have got a much faster result than like trying to go through all of the phases with the AI, if that makes sense. So, so I did see instances of that. I think, yeah, the there was that challenge, right? I felt that dev teams sometimes they try to rely on it too much, and then they nearly underperformed because it's nearly like they forgot that they were actually the resource that was meant to be doing it. And then I had someone else that I worked with, like our CTO, where he was more like, he would use it more to scan the system, find the things that he needed to find. And I think there it can be quite useful, right? Especially when you have really large legacy systems and you need to find how everything's connected and it might be a bit more like spaghetti code, then I feel like the AI can be quite useful then to help you navigate those types of things, right? But yeah, I suppose, I mean, that's really all I can say around that. I'm not an expert on on implementing the AI with the development teams.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very valuable that you are able to say what you don't know and what you know, because I think
Yeah.
that makes you a much more reliable consultant, right?
Yes.
And and I know you have the capabilities to you know to research and figure out
Yeah.
if you
Yeah. And
if you
leverage.
need to, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how it is, right? You can't know everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What I was talking with Swati Swoboda. She's working on Shopify, and she told me that she's spending more time reading code than writing code, right?
Yes.
Because she
That's
has
it.
all
Yeah.
these agents, and Shopify's fast forward to how to use. They're leveraging more on AI on the software development process. So she told me that, and I think that I agree with that. But the over reliance, as you mentioned, I think that's an important factor. I mean, if we rely too much on the agents, on designing the solution, then that becomes an issue, right?
Yeah.
I try, right? I've been trying Cloud Code recently. I was using ChatGPT before, and I started using Cloud Code. And it's amazing what you can do, but you have to be very specific, and the specificity becomes the issue, right? Or the lack of specificity becomes an issue, right? But you could give, a Ruby script. I prefer Ruby myself, but I could build a Ruby script that could take me a few hours, but I wouldn't because I have other important things to do, right? It's not critical, right? But now I can say to Claude, build me the Ruby script. These are the requirements. I'm not necessarily liking the styling code, but it works. So it's good enough, right?
Yes.
For my use case. I think what I'm trying to say, in other words, is craftsmanship starts by us doing something with our hands, experimenting with it, making mistakes, right? If we over rely on the agents that they build it, I could, but I don't really want to maintain that script that the agent coded, right? Because it's styling, it's not the level of craftsmanship that I would appreciate, right? But it's actually good enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you actually make me think now, like if I had to compare it, and I remember when you run agencies, right, you're always trying to leverage the slightly cheaper resource so you can make better margins, right? So the trick to a good agency was always to have a good mix of senior developers and junior developers, correct? But what you make me think now is if imagine all of the code was generated by juniors. In essence, that's what you're getting, right? You're getting like junior level code. It works, it does the thing, but did it follow the best practices and methodologies of coding? Most probably not, because it tried to get there at its fastest route, which is what it's programmed to do. So what you end up with is a system that's built, let's say, by juniors. Now your senior level person comes, and as you say, you don't want to maintain that. That's when it starts to become a problem, right? And can that scale? Normally it won't scale so well. And I think, when everyone uses the samples and goes, yeah, but Claude can code so well and blah, blah, blah. It's always in the context of, I think, smaller developed things and not large scale systems that need to like really handle load. And I mean, that's just like I suppose like an educated guess. But yeah, it makes me think that when you say like that, now you didn't even want to maintain what it wrote. It was kind of like a senior not wanting to work on the junior's code, right? And that's like a real thing. And then what you end up with is legacy code that becomes like spaghetti code, and then no one actually wants to work on it. So then the only one who's going to work on it is the AI. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would go and say, reduce this or make it, better in this particular way. The other, and this is more on my personal experience, the other way that I've been able to leverage more cloud code is, so I'm context switching, right? I have multiple meetings throughout the day, so I don't have the 4 uninterrupted hours to just code, right? So my productivity goes down because of that, right? So, but I can do 30 minutes of coding with Claude, telling what to do. And then, Claude keeps the context and works as a junior developer. So I become better at fixing the junior's code and getting the quality of the code that I want. And Cloud Code can keep the context. And in the same day, I can spend 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 30 minutes there. And then I'm going to be more productive on building a feature than without Cloud Code.
Yeah, I suppose again is right. It's just understanding what you're working with. So if you understand the limitations or what it can do and what it, you can maximize that capabilities. I suppose where it starts to fall apart is a lot of people don't understand what they're using the tool, right? They don't understand like all its capabilities and all its limitations, and people start to believe that already like AI is at like this really advanced level where it's not, right? So yeah, I suppose it's just again about understanding and knowing what you're working with. But I mean, we're still very early, right? It reminds me of like when the internet came about, right? And everyone started building websites. And I mean, you remember what the first websites looked like? They were terrible. And then you look at websites today. So I mean, we're only at the real beginning, and I don't think anyone really knows where we're going to end up with the AI stuff. But I'm sure it's going to be incredible, whatever we end up doing.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about models cannot do abstractions, I usually add yet, because that happens this year. Maybe in next year that's going to be solved, right? So it's going faster. Yeah. So Grant, we're running out of time, but I truly appreciate you being here today. We had a great conversation. We learned a lot. Any final remarks before we wrap it up? Any advice for people trying to implement AI in the business?
Yeah, I think firstly, every business should just focus on fluency. Just become AI fluent. Understand, what it's about, understand the basics, understand how to interact with Claude or ChatGPT. And I think something I'm always told by another colleague is I think the key is just to play with it, right? It's to engage with it. So you're never going to understand it unless you're playing with it. So go install Claude, start writing prompts, start with prompts, go on a paid version for a month, use co-work. And I think the first part is the generative AI, the prompting, stuff like that. And then I think, if you really start to get into it, I think there's a lot of like value in even playing with the agentic stuff, right? A lot of people you move from just talking with the systems, and then you move into having something do something for you, while you're not even there. So I think the key point there is, I think what most people would say is be curious, go out, play with it, learn and try and understand it a bit. And I think anyone can do it, right? It's not now at the power of the techies or anything like that. I think a salesperson or anyone could just go and play with it and start to leverage it in their everyday life. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's it.
Amazing. And I completely agree. The technical requirement or technical knowledge to start playing with generative AI has been going down. I mean, you don't need to be a mechanical engineer to drive a car.
No.
You don't need to be a technologist to play with Gen AI. So, yeah,
Yes.
great insight.
I think the barrier to entry is very low, right? I mean, anyone can go and install it and start typing. And even if you don't want to type, you could do the voice.
Yeah, I heard people work better with voice than typing, and they're
Yeah.
doing amazing things with it. So,
Yeah. I have a
Grant,
colleague who
thank you for
swears by it.
joining us today. Go ahead. Yeah.
He just swears by the voice. He says it makes it about 4 times faster to interact with it.
Interesting. Grant, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Cheers.